Welcome to the Lovecraftian podcast. This is June the 3rd, 2018. Already June. Paul Tremblay is our guest today. Hey, Paul. How's it going?
Hey, Mike. How you doing? I'm doing very well now that I've finished swearing at my phone laptop.
Finished swearing at the technology.
Yeah.
When I told you Google Hangouts was moody, I was not kidding. Before we talk to Paul, I have a public service announcement. Laird Barron's Blood Standard book, his new crime novel, is now available. I think earlier this week. Let me put Philip on the screen there. There you go. So yeah, rush out and buy that.
It's awesome.
It's excellent. Yes.
Also, remember, if you would rather listen to the show on your commute or while you're exercising or whatever on the go, instead of watching it on YouTube, the audio edition is always available, typically available the next day, which means Monday, late afternoon or so is when I get it done. So if you're watching YouTube now or later and you'd rather listen to this on the go, you can certainly do that. And I've got the links in the show notes. Paul Tremblay. Well, let's do our introductions and then we'll introduce Paul Tremblay. I'm Mike Davis, Lovecraftian. Kelly, let's start with you and work our way up.
Sounds good. I'm Kelly Young, editor at Strange Eons magazine.
God, you insult a guy and he doesn't even get it.
Your insults bounce right off of me.
Matt.
I am Matt Carpenter. I have got today's prize.
All right.
It's a wonderful hardcover copy of the book Ride the Star Wind from Broken Eye Books. This is a gorgeous anthology and the content is great. You can see it's fairly substantial and I just think the art's spectacular on the cover.
Nick Upker cover.
Yep, it is.
All right, thanks. Philip?
Philip Fracassi, author and screenwriter.
And Rick?
Rick Lay, writer.
So Paul Tremblay is the author of A Head Full of Ghosts, Disappearance at Devil's Rock, and Cabin at the End of the World, and other books. Cabin at the End of the World comes out on June 26th. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. You can go to, I think, Amazon and other places and pre-order it. And I believe it'll...
Please do.
Yeah, that always helps. And I believe it'll be available on audible.com too. Do I have that right?
Yes. Yeah, there'll be an audio, or there will be an audio version, yeah.
Okay. You know what? I want to start with a comment that Matt made before you came on, because he just finished Disappearance at Devil's Rock, and I think the first chapter to Cabin at the End of the World is at the back.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So what did you have to say about that, Matt?
Okay, well, among other things, what I find really sort of compelling about your writing is this ability to slowly ratchet up the tension so that by the time we're getting close to the climax of the story, it's just about unbearable. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but like at the Disappearance at Devil's Rock, when the mother is trying to sort out what happened near the end of the book, and she's reading certain things in a sequence, and it just gets, frankly, it's like the reader's stomach gets twisted in a knot. And the same thing happened reading that first chapter for The Cabin at the End of the World. It's like everything starts out so beautifully, and by the end, it's like I could hardly take it. It's like, so it seems to me like this is something that you've been really giving a lot of thought to in your work.
Well, geez. Oh, thank you. I mean, I couldn't ask for a better response to either book. Yeah, geez, I'm honored. Disappearance at Devil's Rock, that book felt to me like more of like a slow burn compared to A Head Full of Ghosts. I mean, not that A Head Full of Ghosts was like wall-to-wall action or anything, but there was a bunch of different stuff going on. And Disappearance at Devil's Rock has, at least for the first half, more of a mystery structure. So I'm glad. I mean, that was sort of the goal. I really wanted, to have that slow burn, be introduced to all the characters, and have everything slowly come to a head. So I appreciate that. That's how it worked for you.
I read in an interview that you don't actually you don't really like most home invasion stories.
Yeah.
And if I have this right, and I'm probably going to paraphrase it badly, but you said something to the effect of you wanted to write one that you would want to read. Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, obviously all of us love horror, and I love horror, and I think one of the things that you should give yourself permission to do as a fan is it's okay to be critical about the parts of your fandom or your genre that you don't like. So for me, I'm not trying to, and I'm also not trying to say like this is prescriptive to everybody who watches horror, but home invasion stories for me personally just haven't really worked as much. Now, there's certainly like sort of that realistic ick factor that could be part of it, but I don't know, for so many of them, it just seems like a cheap way, to put people who are sympathetic characters and have them essentially be tortured or threatened with violence. And I don't know, there are too many of those kind of movies that, even though they're supposed to be sympathetic family character or just characters, whoever it is that's being invaded, they don't really make them full characters. They're all sort of just avatars, and it's almost like very by the numbers for a lot of them. I mean, not all of them. I really actually enjoyed Mike Flanagan's Hush, which was on Netflix fairly recently.
Yeah.
I thought that was a cool, clever way to do the home invasion story. And actually, one of my earliest memories of HBO back in the 80s, we got HBO really early where I lived. Our town won the cable lottery or something. They didn't show the actual movie. They actually showed a filmed Broadway adaptation of Don't Wait Until Dark. Wait Until Dark. Sorry.
Right. Yeah.
And oh man, I was mesmerized as a kid, because it was on stage, so there wasn't, a lot of blood or violence, so I could watch it. But man, the tension, especially in the last part of the movie where, she figures out that she can turn out all the lights in the apartment. She knows where she's going, but the invader doesn't. So, I mean, there are definitely a few that I like, but I feel like too many of them go to places that I don't like in horror stories. So, I mean, I guess it sounds a little bit of glib or obnoxious on my part to say, oh, I want to write one that I would like to read or sit through, but that was sort of the excitement of the challenge was, put my money where my mouth is. If I say I don't like this kind of subgenre, why don't you try making one that you think, is worthy of sitting or worth sitting through, I guess.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because I had learning the general synopsis of Disappearance at Devil's Rock and Cabin at the End of the World, which I've not read yet. Both of them initially did not appeal to me, and not because they're Paul Tremblay books, because I loved A Head Full of Ghosts. So I recently sat down and read Disappearance at Devil's Rock, and by the way, I really, really did like it.
Well, thank you.
But I think we're about the same age. I'm a parent too, and I was like, no, I don't want to read about a kid getting kidnapped, because that, as you said, I think in an interview, as a parent, that's one of your greatest fears, and it certainly is mine.
Yeah.
But then I read it, and it was talk about ratcheting up the suspense, but it was done very, very well. And same thing with Cabin at the End of the World. I'm not interested, just like you, I'm not interested in home invasion stories.
Yeah.
So I know I read Disappearance and loved it, even though it wasn't one of my particular themes that's, at the top of my list. So, I feel like the same thing will happen with Cabin. So I can't wait to read it.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, you and my wife, because Lisa won't read Disappearance, Devil's Rock either. And she's probably not going to read Cabin, which I totally understand. I mean, Head Full of Ghosts made her cry. So, yeah, well, with Cabin, it was funny. Yesterday, I was in New York City really quick for Book Expo or BookCon. I'm getting confused. I guess Book Expo was Thursday, Friday, and then which is more for industry people, and it changed over to BookCon. But anyway, I was on a panel, and one of the panelists said, "Oh, I was glad to hear you mention that you're putting like a twist on the home invasion, or you don't really like home invasion stories." Because he said the same thing. It was like, when I heard home invasion, I'm like, I don't know if I want to read that.
Yeah,
I don't know. I hope it'll bring sort of more people they'll be able to suck some people in. It's a short book, and I try to keep one of the goals for that book was to try to keep the tension, like once it starts, to not let up, which was hard. So I knew it had to be a short book. So I'm excited, and nervous as I am for any book that comes out. But so far the early returns have been pretty good. So we'll see.
Well, when I see the author say, I don't like home invasion stories, so I'm going to write one that I might like, that gives me I'm like, then I feel like, okay, I got to read this. Plus Stephen King, he likes your work, and I think he said that this was his favorite yet of yours. So
yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, not that he's crazy, but it's crazy that he reads my stuff and responds to it and has responded to it, as well as he has. It's very surreal. He's a very nice guy. Yeah.
Feeling.
No, absolutely. Yeah. No, I sent him an email because I just read his The Outsider this week, which I really enjoyed. And he was like, "Oh, thanks. It means a lot coming from you." I'm like, "Stop it."
Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, was it you, Philip, that was going to suggest asking him about The Outsider, see what he thought of it?
Who?
So I can't remember.
No.
Yeah, we'll blame you. Sure.
Sure, I'll take it.
Somebody. So it was good. I haven't read that one yet either.
I just finished it as well, and it was one of the better Kings I've read, and I've read.
Now, okay, I'm halfway through.
Let me just tell you how it ends.
No spoilers.
Thanks a lot.
I do think it's interesting, and this isn't a spoiler because I think you've already noticed this if you're halfway through it. But like his last, those Bill Hodges cycle of books, and now this one, he really is. He's writing mystery novels that have an element of horror to it, and that element can be introduced either early or later. And actually, in The Outsider, it kind of comes a little bit later. But it really are. It's these are really sort of pot boiler mystery sort of setups, but then he totally twists it, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I do too.
I've said this before on the show, but John Connolly does something similar with the Charlie Parker mysteries. Charlie Parker's a detective, and then slowly throughout the series, the supernatural is more and more introduced, but it's like this, it's on the edge of the plot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got to read him. I've had my good friend Jack Haringa. I don't know if you guys have met Jack, but he talks and lauds John Connolly in that series in particular. He says nothing but great things about it. So I definitely should read those.
Yeah, it's great, and it's been a long time, but I always catch the latest one. But it's been a long time, but I don't think even the first several of them that there's anything supernatural in them at all, and it just slowly builds through the series as opposed to building through a book.
Right.
Just one book, I mean. But anyway, can you give us a spoiler-free synopsis of Cabin at the End of the World?
Sure. I'll try. Yeah. So Andrew and Eric are a married couple, and they're one's maybe 40, the other one's approaching his 40s, and they have an adopted daughter named Wen. They adopted her from China, and she's 7 going on 8. And so the small family has rented a cabin up in northern New Hampshire, sort of a fictional northern New Hampshire, but one that would be familiar, I think, to people like me who have rented cabins in New Hampshire. But they rented a cabin that's sort of purposefully, out, not totally like abandoned, but certainly off the grid. There's no, cell phone reception, and there's like a couple of miles in between each cabin that's on the lake. So they're up there, and Wen is playing outside in the front yard of the cabin on her own, and one stranger shows up at first, and then 3 others come shortly after. And basically the strangers say to Wen, before she goes in to get her dad's, that they need the family to help them prevent the end of the world. And that's sort of how it opens, and it sort of goes from there. It's a happy, fun time for everybody, for the whole family. Yeah.
Did you, obviously it's set way out there, I'm guessing anyway, correct me if I'm wrong, so that they don't have internet and cell phone reception and can't.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I've spent like years railing against, I think R.L. Stein said something, you can't write a horror novel because of cell phones, and that just really pisses me off. So I sort of purposely almost did like Devil's Rock and A Head Full of Ghosts, made sure I use all the technology that I could. But no, this book, it could be a stage play because it's really just one setting. It's inside the cabin. There is a television that becomes important, like a satellite television, so they can get some images from the television screen. But yeah, there's no internet, no cell phones, and that did have to. I mean, I had to set it up so it wouldn't be easy to call for help, kind of thing, you know.
Yeah. No, I was just wondering if you had even considered at any point putting it in the 70s or anything like that, but it sounds like not.
Yeah, no, I mean, without getting too obnoxious, too, you know, I first and foremost, I hope this book works as, you know, a horror suspense novel, but I also hope that for a lot of readers, it'll serve as an allegory for our current socio-political predicament, shall we say, in the West. So it was important to me to set it in the now times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Guys, I want to move on to Disappearance at Devil's Rock in a minute, but do you have any questions for Paul regarding Cabin at the End of the World that I haven't asked?
I'll have one, but it can wait till after we discuss the other book.
No, it's fine. I don't need to do all the talking.
Well, it has to do with, like, okay, obviously you are having more and more success in your writing, you know, getting wider and wider releases and blurbs from, you know, a celebrity like Stephen King. What about other media? Have you been talking to anyone in film studios or television studios or Netflix or anything like that? Or, I mean, if you're not allowed to talk about it, you can share with us, because we all can keep a secret.
Yeah, and no one ever watches or listens. So
No, well, I mean, A Head Full of Ghosts has been optioned, you know, and that's been announced publicly, and it actually has a director now, and it's Osgood Perkins who did The Black Coat's Daughter and I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in This House. Both movies I love, so I'm super excited that he's on board, and yeah, hopefully years now. That's been described to me as a typically slow sort of Hollywood kind of experience because there's some bigger studios involved, but it sounds like it's actually starting to grind forward a little bit, which is very exciting. But Cabin at the End of the World's also already been optioned by Film Nation. Film Nation's independent production company, but they've done some great movies. And the cool thing is they're sort of like one-stop shop, so they don't really have to please a bunch of different people. They just kind of do everything themselves. But they did Arrival, you know, based on Ted Chiang's short story.
oh God, what a great movie!
Story of Your Life, yeah. No, so I'm super excited that book is with Film Nation.
Now,
sorry, go ahead.
Now, are you going to have any, besides like some courtesy visits, are you going to have any say on the screenplay? Or are you not allowed to say?
No, I have no contractual say for the screenplay. I think, you know, that said, the first two screenwriters that wrote the screenplay for Head Full of Ghosts, Luke Piotrowski and Ben Davis Collins, really good guys, and I got to meet them and have dinner with them in LA a few times, and they would sort of keep me in the loop. They're no longer working on the project, so I don't have my in with the Head Full of Ghosts crew as much as I did. But Film Nation sounded like they really wanted me, you know, someone involved, and I've already, you know, I did like a long Skype with the two screenwriters for Cabin, and that was great. You know, and it sounds like, you know, they want my input here and there, so which is fine. You know, Phil could talk more than I could about writing screenplays because I haven't written a ton of screenplays, and I wouldn't presume that I would know how to write an excellent screenplay because it's a different medium. I think most writers would realize, hey, you know, I've spent my life working on novels or short stories. It's not going to be like just an easy switch over to screenplays. You know, obviously I want certain things to be in the movies. You know, I'd be lying if I said that. But, you know, for now, I'm more than content just to be like the guy on the sideline. You know, maybe in a few years I wouldn't mind trying to dip my toe in a little bit more if opportunities come up. I did have like almost a pseudo offer for a Netflix TV show opportunity, but yeah, things fell through and the timing wasn't right. So, you know, if something like that happens, you know, I'll certainly listen and see what happens.
It from what you're describing of the plot of Cabin at the End of the World, it seems like it would necessitate a lower budget because it's in essentially one place. So
yeah, I think that's actually an advantage for it. You know, they could make it for fairly cheap and spend the money, I don't know, elsewhere on either actors or whatnot. I mean, the TV is important, so there's some things that you see, you know, that would take, I guess, whatever piece of the budget you would need, that would take it up. But
right,
yeah, otherwise, I actually thought about, geez, I could probably write this as a screenplay just because it's sort of essentially, you know, is. I mean, I feel like it would have been easier to adapt to a screenplay as opposed to something like A Head Full of Ghosts, which I could sort of see as like a kind of a nightmare with all the different things that are going on there.
Yeah. Philip, you want to add anything to that?
You could also adapt it to a stage play.
Yeah.
Sounds like. I haven't read it. I'm excited to read it. Obviously it hasn't come out yet, but no, I don't know. I mean, its screenplays are. They're just. It's just a technical thing. You just have to understand the technicalities of formatting and what's expected and how to describe certain things and how to put certain visuals into words. But it's really, you can take. Paul could probably take like a 1 hour class and be able to write a feature screenplay. I mean, there's a lot of little things like beats and structure issues and stuff like that people harp on. But yeah, no, I mean, a lot of fiction writers seem to be writing screenplays these days, doing a lot of their own adaptations. And Gillian Flynn was very successful with hers, and I know others are. Cormac McCarthy, not so much.
Well, maybe he, like me, I can't think in 3-act structure. Like that to me is just like,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. It's interesting to talk about screenwriters who become fiction writers and fiction writers who work, because it is hard to, like, as a fiction, when I write fiction, it's hard for me not to use the structure because it's so ingrained in my head because I was a screenwriter professionally, at least first. And so it is interesting to be able to do both is a good thing to be able to do. And I think, Paul, I would like, and the thing is, it's like if you're, if you're getting a big studio and professional screenwriters who have had great success in this field, I mean, that's, sometimes it's better to kind of like see what they do with it because they know better how things translate. But I would definitely like to see you doing your own adapting work down the road. I mean, plus it's another paycheck.
No, absolutely.
Which is another bad.
Money's good.
Money's good.
I can't
Go ahead,
mention.
I'm sorry,
I would say I can't mention the project just yet, but I am writing, or within the next week or two, I have to start writing like a 12 to 15/20 page screenplay. So basically, 15 to 20 minutes of film for an anthology horror movie. So I'm excited to try it because I feel like that'll be a good sort of, if nothing else, even if it doesn't come to fruition, it'll be a good little mini training process in writing a screenplay.
Yeah, let me know if you need help.
Thanks, I appreciate that, Phil.
I was going to ask about the previous novels before we go to Disappearance.
Sure.
Well, hang on, Frida. I'm trying to write down Cormac McCarthy as a list of guests who will never say yes to being on this show. Since
I don't think
Cormac
McCarthy cares much about traditional screenplay structure. I've read his screenplays.
Anyway, go on.
Anyway. Well, I was going to ask about. We were talking about crime and noir and horror and mentioned John Connolly, and I was curious, Paul, because Mike and I were actually talking on the phone a while ago, and we were talking about your work and the book previous to Head Full of Ghosts. Those are crime, right?
Yeah.
Qualify them as crime, but they weren't really supernatural, but they had sort of more quirky element, I guess.
Yeah, so I mean, the detective was narcoleptic, so I gave him the worst, sort of diagnosis or symptoms of narcolepsy that he could have. So he would not only would he fall asleep at inopportune times, but when he fell asleep, he fell directly into dream states, and suffer from hypnagogic hallucinations. They're often referred to. So his dreams were so real, he would have a hard time discerning what was real or not. So even though there wasn't any supernatural elements, there was sort of the strange dream aspect that made it feel, I guess, a little bit surreal. So I don't know. I used to tell people because when I wrote The Little Sleep, for example, I'd spent my writing life writing horror short stories, and I just happened to have this idea for a crime novel that wasn't horror. So I was a little bit anxious about being introduced as a crime writer. So like I used to tell people, like, "Oh, I wrote that book with a horror attitude," whatever the hell that means. I still think there might be like a nugget of truth to that, but.
Yeah, it's kind of a backwards. No, I shouldn't say that, but it seems to be. And I don't want to use Laird Barron as an example, but I think it happens pretty consistently. Is that a lot of horror writers are kind of pushed toward crime because it's a more broader market appeal, I guess.
Right.
Although that might be shifting over the last couple of years, but yeah, it's interesting that you, in a way, well, you wrote a lot of horror, but then you wrote the first couple novels were crime, and then you kind of switched gears to horror, and now your readership is really, blossomed.
Oh yeah, it's not even close. I mean, the crime, the first one, Little Sleep, it did okay. There's a lot of things that happened that didn't, everything that could have went wrong sort of did with the publisher and with both novels. Yeah, so no, I'm very happy to be with my new publisher. Didn't have a good experience with Henry Holt. And I'm very happy to be back in Horrorland, where I'm definitely more comfortable. But yeah, I'm super excited for Laird. I mean, Laird's first, crime novel is awesome. And he's given me a description of the second novel, and I really can't wait for that. I think he slips in a little bit more of weird/horror stuff into the second novel. But the first one's great. I would recommend, not only any of Laird's fans. They obviously it should be like a no-brainer that if you're a fan of Laird, that you're going to read this novel. But hopefully, it brings them a lot more new fans too.
I'm sure it will bring them some fans that are crime readers. What you said about your detective a couple of minutes ago made me think of, I don't know if you ever saw it. I don't think it lasted very long, but there was a TV show called Awake a few years back, and it's a married couple and a son, I believe. They've just got one son, and they have a car accident. So he can never tell what's real and what isn't. When he goes to sleep, he's living in a reality where his wife survived the car accident. And then when he goes to sleep again, he's living in a reality where his son survived the car accident. And, are both of them real? Are neither of them real? It's kind of an interesting setup.
Yeah. I've heard the title of the show, but I hadn't watched it. Oh, that sounds interesting. It sounds like they stole my books. No, I'm just kidding.
Those guys are lawyer.
Yeah.
So Disappearance at Devil's Rock, I really, really liked it. Can you give us a synopsis of that one for those who have not read it yet?
Yeah, sure. So, the book opens with Elizabeth, who's a single mom. She gets a midnight phone call from one of her sons, Tommy. He's 13, going on 14, or 7th grade, going on 8th grade. And Tommy was supposed to be over his best friend's house, and the three of them Tommy and two of his best friends were at a friend's house sleeping over. So anyway, she gets the midnight phone call, and it's one of Tommy's friends, Josh, and he says, we snuck out in the middle of the night to go to Borderland State Park, which is, just a big state park in the suburban area just outside of Boston. But it's quite sizable. I think it's 20, maybe 30 acres. Actually, no, it's bigger than that. Anyway, it's a large state park. Mm-hmm. And with the phone call, she said, Tommy, we snuck out, but Tommy took off, and we don't know where he went. I don't know. It sort of goes from there. I'm not good at the elevator pitch.
Yeah, then the nightmare begins, basically.
Sure, I would say it starts with sort of. I really try to play that scenario as realistically as possible. Both mostly I think in terms of the emotional lives of the people that are affected, but even get into a little bit. It's not quite a police procedural, but you do get a little bit of what would happen. How it would be approached, how they would try to look for this kid. So as all this is happening, though, there are these weird rumors about a shadowy figure that's being seen in and around the state park and in and around the homes that sort of border the state park, and that starts to creep into the story more as to what happened to Tommy.
If I talk about third man syndrome, am I giving away too much of the plot, do you think?
I don't think so. The book's been out for 2 years now, too. So if you haven't read it by now, it's your fault. No,
we'll try not to give any details away, but I'm fascinated with doppelgangers. I think a lot of people are. And then in another interview, I read that you're a big fan of the movie Lake Mungo, and I was like, that's a great film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's this mockumentary set in Australia, if I remember correctly. It's been about a year since I've seen it. And the 16-year-old daughter drowns. And I think you can describe it better than I can, but there's a doppelganger issue involved. And it's pretty fascinating and pretty chilling.
Yeah. No, and you don't know it's necessarily a doppelganger kind of thing going on in the movie until really later, much later into the film. You think there might be like a ghost, and but I agree, it's just a wonderful movie about grief. and it's so affecting for me. And yeah, I obsessed with that movie. I think I could be rightly accused of writing fan fiction of that book or of that movie with Spirits of Devil's Rock. Shoot, what was I just gonna say? Yeah, no, I own 2 copies of that movie, one to keep at all times and one to lend to people or to proselytize with.
Nice.
But it's funny with I don't think it's too spoilery either, but I'm someone who always looks for inspiration when I'm working on something. Like I know a lot of writers who work when they're working on a project, they'll avoid reading or seeing something that's close to what they're doing, and I'm totally the opposite. If I know I'm going to work on a certain thing, I try to read and see whatever might be related to it, just to see if there are any other like random sparks from those works that I can sort of incorporate. So that book, I didn't intend it going in. It was definitely going to have a Lake Mungo vibe, but there ended up being like 3 Australian films that really informed the writing of the book. And there were Lake Mungo for one, Picnic at Hanging Rock, which I think the title obviously is a reflection of that.
Right.
And Snowtown Murders, which is just a harrowing, based on true events movie. Again, in Australia, it's the kind of movie you can only see once, just because it is so. I mean, it's a great movie, but just so disturbing and so upsetting. Yeah, so I ripped off Australia with
The same
Devil's Rock.
Same theme in Snowtown Murders, because I've not seen that one. Missing child or dead child or something.
Not quite. So in the Snowtown Murders, there's this family who's not doing well at all. And it's in an area where working class, but it's sort of very poor area. And there's a family with a couple of siblings. It's been a while since I've seen it, but the mom starts dating or starts inviting this this weirdly charismatic guy around the house. And when you see this guy in action, like he manipulates the kids and some horrible stuff happens, but eventually he sort of manipulates some of these family members and even some like the neighbors into committing some unspeakable crimes in the neighborhood.
Well, in Lake Mungo, the daughter, I won't say much, but I'll just say this: the daughter has dreams about her possible end, I guess you would say, to keep it vague, and that come true. And you use, like you said, a lot of those elements with Disappearance at Devil's Rock. And I was so happy to see that interview where you mentioned the movie, because it does what few horror movies are able to do. It's not about jump scares. It's not about grossing people out. It's about this chilly feeling that we don't know everything there is to know. It's ambiguous, and it may never be explained to us.
No, absolutely. And so even though it is sort of like this quiet movie, for me, there was one scene, toward the end of the movie where, as an adult, I've never been so frightened. To the point where, I happened to be watching it in my house. Everyone was asleep and it was dark. As the scene was happening, I had to purposefully disconnect. Like I used to open my phone, not to look at it, but just to have like the light. Like I had to, because I was so full body, like freaked out. I had to try to disconnect for a minute or two. Like I can't tell you the last time or since another movie or film has affected me, in that way. I'm hoping Hereditary might be close this week. I have high hopes for Hereditary coming out. You guys seen or heard about that movie coming out? Totally just random thought.
Just the title. What's it about?
Oh, I don't know. Like I've tried to avoid reading about it, but it's another A24 production. A24 did The Witch, The Lobster, and some other movies that I think have been really good. So it's gotten a lot of hype from the circuit, the festival circuit, but like a lot of review venues that I tend to trust have been just saying, "Oh, this is like one of the scariest movies that they've seen in a long time." Have you seen it already?
Sorry,
I was gonna say, Philip, did you already see an early screener or anything like that?
No, I
haven't seen it.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm dying to see it. I mean, I read a review of it, and I shouldn't have, but it didn't spoil anything.
Yeah.
But it was funny because even reading the review, I was like, it sounds like it's a very complex film. It sounds like they do. It's done in a way that's going to be probably a little bit avant-garde. So I'm very interested to see how it goes, because I've heard everyone's hyping it up. So hopefully it'll live up to it. I wanted to ask, because we're talking about those movies, and one thing that I always I think I mentioned this to you when I read way back when I read the first of this kind of like horror trilogy, A Head Full of Ghosts, but they're dark in ways that even a lot of horror books aren't dark. Your books tend to be tonally different than anything I can think of.
Oh wow!
In the genre. A very muted sense of, I don't want to say muted sense of dread because it's kind of, but almost like a muted sense of anticipatory horror, like where it's, we're just it feels like you're almost underwater with this story. And especially in Disappearance of Devil's Rock, even more so, like that book is it freezes your heart as you read it, because it is a heartbreaking book, and it's told in a very heartbreaking way. The structure of Disappearance is so strange in the way that you present all, to your point, it becomes almost like a bit of a procedural, but the setup is such that you're never comfortable. You're not just kind of floating along going, ooh, I wonder what they're going to find out next. I wonder what they're going to find out next. You're kind of like, I don't want to know what they find out next. You kind of don't want to get to the end because you don't want to know, what happened, because you can already get a sense that it's not good. And I think, you don't need me to tell you this, but I think it's what's interesting about reading your work is just you do such a great job of creating that tone that I think is so unique to those two books in particular. I haven't read Cabin yet, but it's such a unique experience as a reader to read something that you really invest in emotionally, and you kind of reel the reader in, very slowly, and you kind of get them hooked into the story. And then once you're there, you're really immersed. And I thought of it because when you were talking about Lake Mungo, it made me think that's how I feel when I read your books. Like I get very immersed, and it's very unsettling. And I remember like PMing you during, I think, one or two, was saying like, God damn it, Paul, this is, this is breaking my heart, or this, you're screwing with me, or whatever. Because it does get under your skin. So it's a really nice, it's a really great talent. And I can see why King is such a fan. So I'm really excited to read the Cabin at the End of the World. I remember hearing talking about it at Necronomicon, and so I'm excited for it to finally be coming to fruition.
Wow. Well, I mean, geez, thanks. That means a lot coming from you, Philip. I mean, it's funny, the tone. I guess it's something I'm going for. I mean, but it's almost like I feel like I'm talking in retrospect. I think I knew with The Head Full of Ghosts and Disappearance of Devil's Rock. I guess what I could use to my advantage was, there are hints that there's going to be like, probably multiple events, but like a central event that's just so horrific and sad that you can sort of use the fact that the reader is sort of anticipating that this is going to happen. So as you sort of walk your way toward that event, you're also learning a lot more about these characters who, you may not necessarily identify with, but you certainly want to empathize with. I mean, even some of the quote unquote villains of the stories, I hope that people feel bad for Marjorie, whether or not in A Head Full of Ghosts, whether or not they think she was possessed or not. I hope, there's a scene at the end that I think is incredibly sad, right before sort of like, the last sort of piece of fireworks of A Head Full of Ghosts. And even similar to the, I won't name him, but the quote unquote villain of Disappearance of Devil's Rock. I mean, he's obviously, a very disturbed, sort of sad individual. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's the dirty secret of horror, but not every horror story has to be this way. But I kind of feel like if you can start from a place of empathy with almost all of your characters, even the ones that are sort of horrible people, if you can at least start from a place of the want to understand what motivates them, to me, I think that it just helps to create the tension, because you want to know what happens to these people, and then you want to see what the survivors are going to do afterward, I guess. Because it's a horror story, not everyone's going to survive. No spoiler alert there, I guess.
Yeah, I've heard you mention empathy in other interviews, and it's fascinating that you bring it up. And I think part of the reason Philip was talking about how unsettling it is, Disappearance of Devil's Rock, And one of the reasons it's unsettling, at least for me, is that this family is very, very real. You know, the kid plays Minecraft,
Yeah.
the girl has a diary, all sorts of things like that just coming together and make it real. And then you can't help but feel the empathy for these characters because they seem three-dimensional, not two-dimensional, as in a lot of books.
Yeah. And some of that is just, as all of us who write, it's just like, you just take kind of what you see. Like my son obviously was huge, into Minecraft for a long time. And I don't know, I kept a diary a little bit when I was younger, and I know tons of people who did. And I don't know, I think the other part of it is if you're going to use those details, you kind of make sure you have to use them in some way. So, once I was trying to find my way into the lives of those teens, I knew they were all gamers. I'm not much of a gamer, but I was like, oh, I can talk about Minecraft. So I bet. And then once I thought about Minecraft and sort of how, there were some of these shadowy figures within the game itself, it's like, oh, that's a cool little parallel with what's potentially going to go on with the novel. So, again, to me, I just find like the more you can sort of dig into your characters, I find more times than not, there are these like cool connections that you didn't even anticipate. Like even with the Head Full of Ghosts, without getting too well, the whole I won't outline the whole scene, but the idea of the spaghetti sauce becoming a big deal, to me that was like a fun discovery. Like I threw that in early on in the book because my son doesn't like spaghetti sauce. I mean, he'll eat pizza, which would drive me crazy, but he would, if I make spaghetti, it has to be butter and cheese and no sauce. So I put that in just as like a quirk, but by the end of the novel, I was like, oh man, that's going to become like a big deal. And writing's hard and drudgery, but like those little moments of weird discovery, those are like the fun parts.
Right. So speaking of these types of connections, in Disappearance at Devil's Rock, the mother and the daughter have occasion to find some of Tommy's diary, and that's all I'll say about it. But there's this one drawing, and I've got this in quotes. Tommy drew, quote, a skeleton with 3 heads, a pig-faced human, and this one thing with creepy tentacles dripping off the front of its face. And so maybe I'm one of those readers who are making connections that aren't there, but I'm going to ask anyway. So if it's nerdy, you just tell me this is not what you had in mind. But the skeleton with 3 heads, my son's a Minecraft player too. Yeah. And there's something called a wither boss in Minecraft. Right. So you're aware of the wither boss?
Yeah. No, those were, I think, references to Minecraft. Absolutely.
Pig-faced human, that's in Minecraft. It also made me think of House on the Borderland. And of course, the creepy thing with tentacles, I'm assuming you're talking about Cthulhu, but the rest of them seem Minecraft related.
Right, yeah.
So, all right.
Yeah,
good.
Nice.
I didn't miss the boat on it because in big part thanks to my son.
Yeah, it's funny. Geez, when did I write that novel? I guess I wrote that mostly like 2015 and 2016. My son doesn't play anymore, so it's funny. Like some of those details I forget, but as soon as you mentioned it, I was like, oh yeah, I can remember, writing and actually Googling some images of some of those Minecraft beasties. And it's funny. I had my son Cole was probably like 14 at the time. I don't know if I had him read any passages, but I said, hey, is this right in Minecraft? You got to tell me if this makes sense. My Minecraft. Yeah.
There's also a Nick Gucker illustration in that diary.
Oh yeah, he was so much fun to work
awesome.
with. Yeah, and he was so. I mean, not surprising because I'm sure you guys have met Nick and know him, but just such a nice guy and a total professional. Like we went back and forth a few times, and he never got like annoyed with me when I asked him to, to try to do a little bit something different or do this, and didn't blink an eye. And what he sent me was just so awesome. And I can't tell you how many people have told me, it's like, oh man, that drawing in that book is just so. It's so disturbing and so like what it was sort of described as. So he nailed it. He hit it out of the park.
Yeah, I don't know. Nick is kind of a jerk, wouldn't you say, Kelly?
Oh yeah, biggest asshole in the world.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that drawing, and it's a very creepy drawing. Nick did a great job. And then there's one you tweeted about not too long ago. I think someone by the name of Alexandra Lita Green. I don't know if I have her name right. But on Instagram, she did one with, the Tommy holding his knees in the corner of the room, and his eyes are bright and everything, and the rain outside the windows. I linked to that on Twitter. That was awesome too.
Oh yeah, and that was like totally out of the blue. It took my breath away when I saw it, because on the actual Instagram page, I don't know if you clicked over to that. So on Facebook, I mean, on Twitter, it just shows up as a static image, but on her Instagram, it's actually a GIF. GIF, is that the? Right. No one says. Are we going to argue about GIF or GIF here?
It moves. That's all I know.
Yeah. She's working on a Head Full of Ghosts one right now, apparently. So like I can't wait to see it.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah. Like the list for art's pretty amazing too if you click through her Instagram.
Yeah.
I hope she does something with the dollhouse.
Yeah.
For Head Full of Ghosts, the dollhouse.
That would be cool.
Interesting. Yeah. Creepy.
Yeah. Anyone interested? Paul linked to it a few weeks ago, and I retweeted that today. And yeah, that was very creepy. What Nick did was very creepy. Great work. I don't think I've read. Oh, by the way, before I forget, guys, is the Kindle version? I think one of you said the Kindle version of Disappearance at Devil's Rock is only $2 right now.
Yeah, I bought it yesterday.
Yep.
Because I wanted to read it for today, and it was like a bargain basement price. It's practically free. In fact, they came with a note that you're supposed to send me some money. Now, I actually have a question now that I'm talking. Okay, there's probably no answer to this, but okay, so there's a scene where Elizabeth is taking all these things and trying to make them into a grid so she can have the exact sequence of what happens. Now, I know there's some authors who will outline the heck out of their work before they sit down, so they have everything is locked in and meshes with everything else. And there are other authors who just kind of like, I don't know, start in the middle and write and see where the story takes them.
Yeah.
What's your technique?
I've kind of done both. I mean, it sort of depends on the story. Like A Head Full of Ghosts, I didn't have an outline for. I kept a notebook. Like, sometimes I would jot ahead, like in the notebook, but I was very lucky with that story idea. It almost came like fully formed. Like I knew there were going to be 3 parts. You know, what happened before the reality TV, what happened during, what happened after. Yeah, so that one I sort of kind of just pantsed as I went. Disappearance of Devil's Rock, I wrote an outline, and actually it took a long time to try to write an outline because it was more of a mystery structure to me. So I don't feel like I'm good enough to make up like a mystery kind of plot as I go. So I did write an outline. It was very rough and it wasn't very good, but at least it was in a start. And a lot changed by the time I actually wrote the book. But for that part of the novel, like even if I do write an outline, it's not that detailed. It's maybe 10 pages. It's more just like this happens and this happens. So for that part of the book, I didn't like write out the individual police statements and cut them up and.
Oh, is he freezing for me or for everyone?
For everyone.
He'll come back. Hopefully.
I'm trying to make. Yeah. So I guess the short version.
You faded out for about 30 seconds there. So
yeah.
Sorry about that. What were you saying? Never mind.
Yeah.
On the spot.
Yeah.
It was too impactful to repeat twice in one day.
Yeah. Now, I guess I'll say the short version is sometimes I outline, sometimes I don't. And I try to make it organic to the story, if that makes sense. I'll just say, like, if to me the story feels like I should make it up as I go, then I'll do that. Like The Little Sleep or Disappearance of Devil's Rock that has like a big mystery element to it. Those plots tend to be a little bit more confident enough to make those up as I go. So for those novels, but not like crazy outlines, like 10 pages kind of thing.
A couple more questions or comments about Disappearance at Devil's Rock, and then I'll move on. But would you mind just quickly explaining what third man syndrome is? So I read up more about that in the middle of Disappearance at Devil's Rock. the T.S. Eliot, The Wastelands, and
Right. Yeah, geez, you might know more since that research is fresher in your memory. But I think, from what I remember, it goes back to, geez, who's the famous explorer of Antarctica? It wasn't
yeah, I know
Shackleton.
Shackleton.
People are frozen. Am I still here?
Yep, you are.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I think your
Anyway,
internet's
so
just not doing you any favors right now. So,
yeah.
but that's okay.
So I found sort of this almost like apocryphal story about some Antarctic explorers, and they were working their way across, and there were actually 3 of them, but then there was like a mysterious 4th character with them that they swore was with them by the time they got across. But when they got there, obviously there wasn't a 4th person. Then T.S. Eliot sort of, I think, took that story and changed the number to give it a 3rd man syndrome. At least that's my recollection of my years ago research on the subject.
I noticed also that I don't think I've seen this before in a Kindle book. At the end of the Kindle book, there's a reading group discussion questions. How did that happen? Did the publishers just come up with that, or did you come up with that? Or?
They had me do it. I wish they would do it. No, yeah, I wrote the questions. I did it both for Head Full of Ghosts and for this. I think it was more for the paperback. I didn't realize they included that for the Kindle books now, which makes sense. I think once they probably didn't include it in the Kindle until after the paperback was out, I'm guessing. But I think you've seen like sometimes on trade paperbacks, they'll say like a PS or something on it, and looking just for bonus material. So I found those to be quite hard to do because I'm not an English professor coming up with book club discussion questions. But at the same time, I guess it was kind of fun because I could sort of lead where I wanted the question to go to.
Yeah, but what an uncomfortable position to be in, to have to, because there's nothing worse for a writer than having to explain the story to somebody or explain the book to somebody. Right. It's, as you can tell, how hard it is to offer a synopsis without,
Sure.
It is, for whatever reason, it's inherently difficult to kind of like summarize it. So to have to actually put something into a book club, document, I can't imagine. That must have been difficult.
Sorry, we
I
get
asked to write like the.
Go ahead, Paul. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's okay. I was gonna say usually, the author gets stuck with having to write the jacket flap copy too. That's been my experience. Yeah, it's like, man, I mean, it's hard to boil it down because first you've lived in this novel for however long. For me, it's usually a year or more. It's like, well, what's the story about it? The novel is what's the story about? It took me that long to say it, but that's also just because I didn't want to do any of that stuff because I'm lazy and rather do other stuff.
Well, I want to wrap this up soon because I think I'm having possible internet problems, and I know that you're having some problems. But I would like to ask you, you had an interview with Lit Reactor, and quote, Paul Tremblay quote, the old saw of write what you know is truly terrible advice. I think it should be right to try to know. Can you just expand on that for a minute or so?
Yeah, sure. I think, and for so much of what I feel like what I do as a writer, I focus so much on characters. So, even though I'm taking, my family will, and my family shakes their fist at me a lot. I'll be taking quirky stuff that my kids do or people that I know, but they're still, you're trying to create people that you don't know. You're trying to create situations, at least I think, that, might be familiar, and you have to be able to have the courage is maybe a little bit strong, but to be able to go off into a totally other direction that you weren't necessarily anticipating. I don't know, and the idea of empathy is a big deal to me. You want to write about characters who aren't you, who don't look the same as you, who don't have the same experiences as you. I don't know. It's, to me, it boils down to sympathy in fiction. I think is bad. Like I cringe whenever I see like a critic or a reviewer for anything says, "Oh, these weren't sympathetic characters." Who cares if they were sympathetic characters? That's, to me, it's like a sign of, I don't know, the dumbing down of the reader or the movie viewer, because sympathy is easy. Sympathy is rooting for the home team. Empathy is the hard part. Empathy is what makes us human. Empathy is the want to understand someone who isn't you, someone who isn't doing the same things you're doing, but you care enough to want to understand why they're doing it. So, I'm not necessarily saying like, when it's like to write to try to know. I'm not necessarily advocating that you have to dive into like 12 months of research for your plot, because honestly, I will never do that. That kind of research petrifies me. But I guess the shorter version would be, don't be afraid to go in uncomfortable places, and have your characters, be complicated but beautiful people, and let them lead you there.
I really, I saw you allude to this in another interview, like I said, on Lit Reactor, and it was kind of like the Lake Mungo thing hit me out of the blue, because I really connected with it, and I really connect with the empathy thing. Uh, in regards to fiction, everything that you just said, but also in regards to empathy being so important. If you're a very empathic person, you've got a lot of empathy for other people. It, to my mind, becomes a lot harder to mistreat other people, because you're constantly saying, well, how would I feel in their shoes? Or would I say this, if I say this and I was them, would it hurt their feelings? Just a million possibilities.
Right. No,
So,
look, it doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes, and as a
right.
writer, it's hard to overcome the cultural bombardment of negative stereotypes and negative images that we see of people, and how people of color and gay and lesbian people are portrayed in our society. But it's your job as a reader and a writer to break through those mainstream images. To me, that's why I read. That should be the goal of reading and writing, ultimately.
Also, ambiguity. Do you think that makes horror more powerful?
Yeah, it can. I mean, I think it certainly depends on the story. I certainly would never say that every horror story should feature an ambiguity, but I don't know. To me, it's something I connect with as a reader and a writer. I think it reflects our natural state. I mean, I think, our existence, our identity, our memories, they're a lot more ambiguous than we want to think. And it's kind of, if you think about it too much, it gets scary.
Right.
But that's something that's always fascinated me, is just how a lot more malleable reality is. Even from someone who is not a believer in the supernatural. I'm not even necessarily promoting that part of it. I'm just saying the idea that, like, it's proven, like, our memories are so inaccurate, and more inaccurate as time passes. They get usurped by what other people tell you, or by just your own thoughts, sort of going inside those old memories. So I don't know. To me, that's fascinating, and the idea of I think as a horror writer, why not take this sort of natural unease that we have with whatever it is existence is. However, we don't know what it is. What the hell? What are we all trying to live through here? We don't know. So to me, it just seems like natural fodder for writing a horror story.
Yeah, we had a guest on here. I guess it's getting close to a year now. He goes under the writing name of Soren Narnia, and he actually writes for his own podcast. He's also he also has a really great reading voice, so he's talented in two ways. Excuse me. But he basically writes horror and weird fiction for his podcast. We were discussing just more or less what you just said, that something strange happens, but you don't always know it. That doesn't mean that it follows that it must be explained to you.
Right.
I told this story many times on the show, but I told him about my wife and I 15, 20 years ago coming back from a wedding late at night, 2-lane road, woods on either side. And we see this what looks like a two-dimensional shadow of a person run from the left side of the road to the right in front of the headlights. And I saw it, she saw it, so I didn't dream it up. She saw the same thing that I saw, but yet that's never going to be explained to us. And
It was
he's
John Langan.
Yes, it was John Langan.
There,
After all these years, I finally know. But
he's
yeah,
very skilled. You come across him late at night, you got to be careful. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail your story. I had to work in a John Langan shot somewhere.
oh well, I can do that easily. He still owes me a story, so which is commonplace occurrence,
Yeah.
But when you finally get that story, it's great.
Yeah, definitely.
And you're glad that you waited for it. Um, where do you see horror going from here? Because, earlier, 10, 15 years ago, when there were actual video stores where you actually had to go rent a movie instead of stream it, there were sections for horror movies, there were sections for sci-fi movies, and so on and so forth, romance movies. Now you go to a Barnes and Noble now, there's a section for mysteries, there's a section for just about anything, there's a section for sci-fi, and the horror is lumped into the sci-fi fantasy. Do you think that's just one example, so I'm not really asking about Barnes and Noble, but do you see that changing? You see horror getting bigger and bigger right now?
I definitely do think it's getting bigger and bigger. I mean, I have no idea if it's going to remain that way. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I would like to think it would. I mean, I think it certainly can tap into our societal anxieties, like in ways that other genres can't necessarily do so. I'm definitely buoyed by seeing like the success of Victor Laval and Joe Hill and just other writers. It might not say horror on the spine. One thing that I think also, my working with the Shirley Jackson Awards, it was really an eye opener to me. I kind of thought this might be the case, but once I got involved with the awards, it really was eye opening to see, man, there was a lot of horror being published by a lot of mainstream publishers. It just doesn't say horror on the spine.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, it's hard. It would be cool to have the horror section back in Barnes and Noble. Although, I don't know, the punk rock fan in me, I feel like it's still kind of cool that horror is sort of, I don't know, the outsider still, even within like science fiction and fantasy.
Yeah.
I think genre stuff is being taken more seriously more and more, but horror still lags behind, I think, with maybe romance probably lagging the furthest behind. But certainly within science fiction, fantasy, horror, I think horror is listed third.
Yeah. So the real question is, are you alone in the house right now? Because I've seen two shadowy figures go up the steps in the last couple of minutes.
Yeah, no, everybody's home. Cool. It's John Langan. No, my God.
Yeah, he gets around.
He does get around.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Paul, for being on the show. Guys, do we have any more questions for Paul before we let him go?
Yes. Okay. So,
holy cow.
I know you've got this. You got this great new book, just ready to be released. But what have you done for us lately? I mean, what do you got planned after that?
Well, I just finished and turned
the typical Matt Carpenter question.
I just finished and turned in a short story collection. It's going to be called Growing Things and Other Stories. So Growing Things is a reference to the story that gets used in A Head Full of Ghosts. So there are actually purposely a couple of connections to A Head Full of Ghosts and actually Disappearance at Devil's Rock as well in this collection. So most of the stories are things that have been published in anthologies and whatnot, but there are two originals that I wrote. One almost novella. I couldn't quite make it. I fell 1,000 words short of a novella. It's called Notes from the Dog Walkers. It's really kind of a wild, goofy kind of novella. But in the novella, it gets very meta, and there's connections to A Head Full of Ghosts and a bigger connection to Disappearance at Devil's Rock. And then the last story that I wrote, or it's going to be the last story in the collection, it features Mary from A Head Full of Ghosts as an adult. The tell-all book has come out, and she's at like a Comic-Con kind of convention, and she's confronted by a fan, and she decides to tell the fan a Marjorie Mary style story. So I mean, both of those were definitely kind of fun to write, and not sequels, but it was kind of fun to just revisit a little bit of that character one more time.
Do you have a release date for that one yet?
That'll be next summer. I'm not quite sure what the date will be, but next summer, and from William Morrow, which I'm really excited about. That they're actually going to put out a collection.
Oh man, we got to wait a year for that.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Look, I just want to, for anyone watching, I want to point out that Philips got new headphones and they are wireless. And again, say that the rich live differently from the rest of us. So
Yeah. It looks like a gaming headset. Is Phil a gamer? You're playing Fortnite?
I'm a little bit of a gamer.
He's a player, that's for sure.
There you go.
Just got married.
I did
Oh,
just
that's
get
right.
married.
Congrats, Phil. In person or not
Yeah,
in person? Video.
sort of.
In video.
Pretty
Congrats.
close.
I'll take it. Thank you.
Okay, so for everyone listening, if you like to read on Kindle, Disappearance at Devil's Rock is very inexpensive right now, $2, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know how that long that will last, so pick it up as soon as you can. And The Cabin at the End of the World is out on June 26th. Do I have that right?
Yes, you do. Yep.
And I do know that, look, if you're thinking about buying the book as soon as it comes out, that's great. And I'm sure Paul loves that. But I do know that it helps even more if you go ahead and pre-order ahead of time, and then it'll be delivered to you that day if it's a Kindle or mailed that day. So pre-orders do help. Not that I don't know that Paul needs our help at this point, but every little bit helps.
No, definitely. Please.
Anything else, guys, before we let Paul go?
Well, I was going to mention, Paul, you're doing a bit of a tour for the book, right? I know you're coming to LA on July 1st.
Yes.
I will be there.
Yes. Awesome. No, so there'll be an event in Boston. I'm doing one in Portland, Maine. And then I go to LA or California for a week. So July 1st, I'll be at the Last Bookstore in Los Angeles. And on July 5th, I'll be in San Diego at Mysterious Galaxy. And then I go to England for a week, which I'm really excited about because I've never been.
Oh, wow. That's great.
I'm a guest at the Lit Edge conference in Derby.
So when are you coming to Peoria?
not on this leg, unfortunately. And I have a fun, there'll be a fun day in New York City, July 25th. It'll be myself, Laird Barron, John Langan, Liv Llewellyn, and Nadia Balkan. We'll be reading at 2 different locations on the 25th of July. So New Yorkers, come on out.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Do you have a website where you post the tours coming up or book signings coming up? Did we lose him again?
It froze. I didn't hear that. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question. Can you repeat it?
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Do you have a website where you list the book tours coming up or signings coming up, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I haven't done it yet. I hope this week my publisher will also send me usually do an image with all the dates listed on it. So I'm hoping that's coming this week, but
Right.
paultremblay.net is my blog site. I'll definitely have those up there as soon as I have them all in one place. But like I said, I'll post the tour image to Twitter and Instagram and Facebook as well.
All right. Well, thanks for being on the show, Paul. I really appreciate it. It was great talking with you.
Well, thank you. You guys are very kind. And continue.
I'm sorry we had a few technical difficulties on your side, but I think we got through, and I think one on my side too, but we got through it. So
yeah, on the backup laptop, my son's laptop, which works better than mine, which maybe we should do a laptop swap with my son since he has one that works better than mine.
my son's got a supercomputer, and yeah, this is what I'm dealing with here. So why are the kids' phones and electronics and computers always better than ours? That's what I want to know.
Right.
Okay, here's how it works in my house. I bought myself some noise-canceling headphones so I could listen to music on airplanes. And about 30 minutes after I got them, I noticed that Sam was wearing them. And now they're like his somehow. So it just sort of happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ask for forgiveness, not for permission. That's probably his motto on that.
The circle of parental technological life.
Well, thanks again, Paul. Really appreciate you coming on, and hope to talk with you soon. So all you have to do to get out of here is just close this
Thank you,
browser window.
Mike and everybody. This is a lot of fun. Anytime.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Nice talking
Paul.
to you.
Bye.
So now, on the Lovecraft Easy movie night last night, we watched a movie that Matt picked out.
Don't blame me for this. My God, I wanted to watch Big Ass Spider again.
What movie was it?
I'm gonna have
Spider.
We're never gonna watch Big Ass Spider on the Lovecraft Easy movie
Have
night.
you seen
Just tell
it?
you. No, and I'm not going to.
Well, you should.
I don't like spiders, first of all, especially not big ones.
Okay, fine. Okay, well, what we did was we watched a movie called Personal Shopper.
And
Okay.
the trailer was really good.
It starred the
Kristen Stewart, right?
yeah.
I should have. Yeah, I should have known.
From Twilight. Okay, so at one point there's a murder, and so we were referring to it as personal chopper, but by the end of it, we were referring to it as personal flopper.
Oof.
Well, there's like 15 minutes straight of texting.
And there's a lot of scenes of her buying clothes, scootering through Paris, brooding look on her face, with, like she's got that emotionlessness down pat.
She's good at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's good at acting.
She's good at acting like there's nothing going on inside of her head.
She looks like she's thinking about something really stupid.
I hate to admit this, but I dropped out after 5 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, I should have. If I wasn't the host, I would have.
I watched Ghost Story recently, which is that Affleck movie.
Oh my
Casey
God,
Affleck.
that's one of the worst movies ever made.
But it reminds me of what you're talking about. It's just like there's a scene in that movie where for 10 minutes you're watching
The garbage pail.
Rumi Mara eat a pumpkin pie.
Yeah, and then they
And like
focus on the house.
literally
She
10
comes
minutes.
out, takes out the garbage, goes back in the house. All this is in slow-mo almost.
And the other thing, it's very French.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, so there's some needless.
Do you not like French people?
No,
Yeah,
it's
well,
just you know, it's like there's cultural.
Let's explore this.
No, there's cultural differences. It's like you try and watch a humorous movie from a foreign country, and it's not necessarily funny to an American. So what might fascinate a French person, which is watching this very slender, beautiful, moody woman shop, and try on her owner's clothes, and then masturbate herself while she's wearing these expensive
Oh, he
clothes.
went there.
Wait a minute.
Hold on now.
This movie just got a lot better.
Yeah, you lost me. And
No,
now
I'm afraid it didn't.
We didn't even mention the two topless scenes. So
this movie actually did get fairly decent reviews. I remember.
It was very good.
that's what I'm talking about. And then we watch it
Well,
last
by
night.
her
We're
mom,
like,
maybe.
what the hell?
Wow.
Didn't it win some award at Cannes? Because I kind of got that from the credits.
Because it was French.
I saw something of some prize at Cannes in the opening credits.
It did, yes. I don't remember. I didn't want to, after we watched it, I didn't want to look up anything about it. I was trying to bleach my eyeballs.
Do you not like the French? I mean,
it's like.
Is it when you go to order at McDonald's? Is it freedom fries?
Okay, I'll just give you an example. Okay, there was a Japanese movie called A Taxing Woman, which got all kinds of this.
You don't like the Japanese either?
No, 20 years ago, this movie came out called A Taxing Woman, and it said, "This is the funniest movie from Japan ever." And I watched it, and it's like it didn't have a single laugh in it because the Japanese idea of what's funny isn't necessarily corresponding to what an American might find to be funny. Well, it's the same with the French. What they may find fascinating doesn't necessarily correspond to what I want to see in a movie.
We already understand all this. We just enjoy putting you on the hot seat.
Well,
Just watch cop movies and samurai movies from Japan, and you'll be okay.
Right.
Sure hope you don't have any French and Japanese listeners, Mike, because Matt just killed it all.
Hey, I'll. You know what? That was not me speaking. That was him.
We are losing Patreons.
If you want to see a good French movie, see Diabolique. Is that the movie, Matt?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long time ago. That was the 60s, and it was brilliant. People compared.
Well, you really do have a "What have you done for me lately" attitude today.
Well, admittedly,
Wow.
the 60s was 50 years ago, so you got something there. I don't know. High Tension, I really love that. I just watched a movie called Revenge that was not my kind of film. A little French.
Tell you what. Watch what you need to do is watch this movie, Personal Flopper, and see if you like it, and then come back to us about what a great French movie it is.
The French have been doing some good TV. They did the one about the lake. The Forgotten, I think it was called, and they made an American version of it. And I think The Rain, that new Netflix show. I think that's French.
How did we even get on this?
No, The Rain is Danish.
Oh,
Onwards
Danish.
in the Rain, yeah.
And the Germans did The Dark. That was The Dark.
Right.
That was German, right?
Dutch, yeah.
Oh, was it? Yeah. Okay.
I just
Yeah.
don't. I don't know that out of all the things, humor doesn't necessarily translate well.
Well, let me change the subject. And for those of you
By
who
the way,
can
don't
see,
watch this movie. Do not watch this movie.
I was gonna see how much deeper the hole could get, but sure, let's change the subject.
yeah. So my mom sent me a $50 Amazon gift certificate, which is the best gift almost that you can give me.
All of my
Anyone-
books are available on Amazon.
Anyone needs my email address, let me know. And so I wanted this 5 noir novels of the 1940s and 1950s by David Goodis, and it's like $30, and I don't understand why it's $30. So I can't justify spending $30 on a book because I don't have that kind of money. And so I used the gift certificate to buy it, and I realized why it's $30. I mean, look at this.
Wow.
It's in a case.
It's
Beautiful
gorgeous.
slipcase
It's
edition.
hardcover. It's these pages are just, and it's got a bookmark.
That's
which-
the Library of America books, right?
It's a Library of America book, which, you know, the bookmark is what makes it classy.
If
That should
came
make,
out
that
from
should make
Cent-
Matt happy.
If that came out from Centipede, it would have been double the price at least.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
So it definitely is worth, and I'm very much looking forward to reading these noir novels. Okay, a book that I did not, another book that was sent to me, I bought the Goodis one, was sent to me by a fellow by the name of Robert Ashcroft, and I'm going to get the title of this wrong. There's the Megarothki.
Megarothki.
Megarothke, Megarothke. So Kirkus says, debut novelist, I have not read it yet, debut novelist Ashcroft unleashes a witch's brew of macabre, Lovecraftian imagery in this strange horror novel that couches a heavy emotional arc within its video game-like setting. And so on and so forth. So, it, you know, based on that, it looks pretty good.
There's a lot going
So
on.
Robert
in that
Ashcroft.
review.
Now,
What's that?
I was saying there's a
Sorry?
lot going on in that review. I was video
Mhm.
games and Cthulhu and mystery.
Oh, and I only read half the review. I didn't even get to the let's see here. I didn't even get to the robotic doppelgangers, mutated monsters, and ray guns.
Ray guns.
But this is a very positive review from Kirkus, so
Well, they got their $400 worth.
Yeah.
Well,
Oof, ouch. I like
ouch.
that cover.
Yeah, I think it looks like it from what, you know, like I said, I got too many books on my TBR pile, and people keep sending me more, but this does look interesting. You know, if you're looking for a book to read, maybe check it out. The Megarothki by Robert Ashcroft.
Now, I have an important question.
Okay.
Yes.
Is it macabre or macabre?
I think it's macabre.
Okay. When I was remember that 1960s movie of that name?
Yes.
Okay.
Of that name.
So,
What name, Matt?
well, the thing is, when I was like, I think, I don't know, 11 or something, I watched that movie, and my dad said, "What are you watching?" And I said, "Macabre." and he never let
It's
me
French.
forget. Yeah, right. So
Yeah.
it's not Macabre. That's what I can tell you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm pretty sure it's macabre, but you know, much like octopi and octopuses, there may be more than one way to.
I always
Okay.
pronounced it macabre without the R, but King, who wrote a book called Dance Macabre, pronounces the book Dance Macabre.
Oh, there you
Well,
go.
it's that famous composition by Saint Saëns is Dance Macabre.
Once again, Kelly, you realize that I'm right. I'm
I-
happy for you.
I actually credit that to Stephen King, but
Very
whatever.
happy for you.
Speaking of Stephen King, I read The Outsider. Did you guys all read The Outsider yet?
No,
I am
not
not finished with it, but I'm 3/4 through it.
No, the guests keep demanding that I read their books before I interview them, so I've been a little behind.
Fucking assholes.
I
Well,
know, right?
it's a great book. It's his best book in a long time. And Paul hit on it. We didn't get into it, but I think Paul hit the nail on the head, which was what I think what Stephen King might even, you know, I don't want to be presumptuous. I don't know what Stephen King is or isn't doing, but it seems to me that with this book anyway, he's really taken the Bill Hodges, Mr. Mercedes trilogy and the crime novels that he wrote, and he's infusing them into supernatural and horror. So it reads like a crime novel, the Outsider. But
I agree with that.
But there are definite supernatural elements, and it's kind of a unique voice for King. It's not a traditional King book. It's very slim. I mean, it reads fast, I thought. It doesn't have a lot of the side stories and exposition, all that stuff going on, and
it's almost all dialogue. I think that's why it cooks so quickly.
Really well edited, and
I think he is probably excited again about writing. You know, maybe he was thinking he was writing the same stuff, and now it's like this is a whole new avenue.
Yeah, be interested to see what
I'll tell you
Elevation is
this:
like.
I was loving it, but about halfway through, he introduces a character from the Bill Hodges trilogy, and I did not care for that trilogy, and it just kind of slowed way down for me. But I'm still enjoying it. I'll finish it.
Great. We've just lost Stephen King as a patron now.
I
Good
think
job.
Stephen King is just fine with everything.
I also read Sleeping Beauties. That was
right.
Considering he was thinking of retiring after he finished The Black Tower, he's been incredibly prolific again.
Well, I remember. I remember he announced that retirement, and it was less than a year later that a new book was out.
I don't think he can stop writing. I mean,
I don't know Stephen King personally, but it seems to me from everything I've read about him and people who know him that it's pretty much akin to breathing. You know, he needs to write.
Okay.
How badass was it that Paul was like, I emailed Stephen King and told him I really enjoyed his new book.
Yeah, we get it. You know, Stephen King.
I know, my gosh, rub it in.
Okay, now I got something I want to talk about a little bit.
I did ask.
No, it was cool, man.
Right, Matt's got a comment.
Okay, there's this book. Okay, who needs another version of The Call of Cthulhu? Okay, well, this is an issue by with illustrations by Gary Gianni, and it is okay, and it's got the art is beautiful. Okay, it's not a comic book. It is really just copiously illustrated. There's a picture or so on every page, and they are well worth looking at. It is beautifully illustrated. But okay, the publisher is Flesk Publications, and they say in here, H.P. Lovecraft's 1928 text has been revised in this book to exclude racial terms.
Oh yeah, you're opening up a big can of worms now.
Well, so what they did was they censored the text to make it acceptable to whom, I wonder. Who are they whose tender eyes are they trying to save? Because they still include the term Eskimo in the old ESQIMEAUX French-Canadian spelling.
Yes.
Which you can argue.
French again.
We're looking forward to their edition of Uncle Tom's Cabin next.
Well, the thing is that is a term that the Inuit or the native peoples of that area consider to be derogatory.
Yes. It's the equivalent of calling an Indian a redskin.
Right, because it was...
I think you mean Native Americans, sir.
Well, no, I'm talking about in...
I'm berating Philip right now, but sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so what they did was that this is a term that is offensive to a sizable number of people because it was even if it wasn't meant that way, if the etymology was it was someone who wears snowshoes, it was used in a very racist way by the non-native persons. So they felt okay leaving in Eskimo, and then they deleted a few other words. And I want to say like, well, that's chutzpah to say that you're going to make that decision for us. It's like, are you going to go through the adventures of Huckleberry Finn?
I think Huckleberry Finn does. I think there is a edited
How could that? That's absolutely appalling.
Well, here's the question.
Yeah, they changed the N word to slave.
Yeah, exactly. I think.
Well,
here's
we
the
could
question.
just burn books. I mean, that would be more expedient.
None of us here are agree that H.P. Lovecraft was a nice guy because he was a racist.
Right. Exactly.
He was an appalling racist, but I would think that a better approach would be to have a discussion about the text or maybe an introduction how whether his xenophobia informed the creation of this work, rather than trying to nicey it for us without asking us.
Well, I have two questions. The first question.
You and your technical terms.
The first question is Call of Cthulhu, is Lovecraft's work public domain?
Yes.
I did not think it was.
For the most part.
Actually, this is an issue that we've got a guy coming on who is going to resolve these copyright issues. I don't think it's as simple as we all thought it was, but we think that no one ever renewed the copyright that was held by his aunt's families, as far as I know.
Right.
So I think they can do whatever they want with the text. I mean, I can write the Call of Big Bertha.
It just because if it's public domain, then I guess it's the things people can do anything they want with it. But it's because I have to believe it is, because there's no way the estate would allow them to modify the text. And it's and to your point, Matt, how many versions of this book do we need? As long as books are like that are public domain, publishers will continue to utilize the free content to make a quick buck.
Well, it wasn't quick
they
because
can feel good about themselves, and yet they've got the hubris to do this and then use the word Eskimo, to Matt's point.
Well, okay, but look, it's the reason you get this isn't for the text. It's because of these absolutely gorgeous drawings.
No, that doesn't do it for me either. I mean, they look good, but I mean, how many versions of this story do I need?
No, I only got it for the art, but I find it, I think I can make my own value judgments about what Lovecraft wrote.
That's what you said about Playboy, if I remember correctly. You only got it for the art.
Yeah, well, art has broad meaning in that term.
Okay, all right. No judgments here. Okay, all right. Now, I have a very important request from an Easing fan, and she wants to know how to write a good review. So, Matt, can you talk for a couple minutes on how to get a good review? And anybody wants to add to that. Think of it on Amazon. She just read a book. She really likes it. Instead of writing, "Hey, I really like this book, 5 stars." What are some typical things to expound on, depending on the book?
Well, I think that she needs to write why she liked it. Was it because just to say that you liked it, oh, this was a good read, to me that offers absolutely nothing. But to say that
that was my that's the way I write a review. So
okay.
I'm not good at reviews.
What you say is like, what did you like about it? Was it the dialogue was really good? It was very suspenseful, or this was a surprising way to look at something. I loved the characters. The characters came alive. The descriptions were utterly gorgeous. It opened up my eyes to a genre I wasn't aware of and introduced me to some author that now I want to explore some other parts of their work. So I think, first of all, you have to have read it with a mind that you're going to try and present why you liked it. So I don't know. I would just say, if you could give us some hint as to what about it that you liked, and then if you can put it into context, say, compared to so-and-so's work, it would fit very nicely along the shelf with people who like this particular author, or it reminded me of.
Yeah.
At least that's what I think.
I would add to that, I've noticed that audible.com, with their reviews, they actually give you these cheat questions, and I forget what they are, but they say, what was it about the book you like most? They ask like 5 or 6 questions that make it easier for you to write a review. So you could look at those Audible questions too. But for those who don't know, the reason why I asked Matt this question, because Matt has been reviewing Lovecraftian and horror books for years and years and years. Now, he was doing this far before I ever came on the scene, for example. And a lot of people looked to Matt to know if Matt liked a book, then they were going to buy it. You know, and if he didn't like a book, they weren't.
I tried to be internally consistent. If like I had this rating system in my head, and it may have not made any sense to anyone else, but I tried to be internally consistent about how I applied it. And I didn't try to, if it was a new work by a new author, it was, I approached them the same as if I was reading something by someone I was familiar with. I don't know.
Sure.
I think Phil writes a lot of reviews or looks at a lot of books and talks about them. You might speak to that too.
Yeah, I mean, really, a critical review is, if it's a critical review or a personal review. I mean, a critical review, you know, you can just kind of synopsize the book and talk about to Matt's point, who it would appeal to, what kind of audience it would appeal to, what some comparables are. And then if it's a personal review, like an Amazon reader review, you can just talk about your subjective opinion of it, and why you thought that way. You know, so it kind of depends on which one you're going for. But I think essentially, yeah, you just want to broadly kind of talk about what the book is like, what kind of readers might be attracted to it, and then what your personal thoughts on it are. And I think that's all you can really ask for.
And can I just add my 2 cents? Do not give a synopsis of the book. I mean, that's right there on the Amazon page. We don't need you to tell us what the story was about, spoiler free. That's already been done. We need your thoughts on it and why you liked it.
Yeah, you can point to examples from the text.
Yeah, a lot of people think a review is a synopsis, and it drives me nuts. So Brian Hodge, we're going to get him on here in September, I think.
Oh, cool.
I've got to email him back. Yeah, great guy. I told him that Adam Neville mentioned him on the podcast last week, and it turns out that Brian emailed me back. He's got a new book out called The Immaculate Void, available for Kindle and in paperback. And I don't know, man. This looks really, really interesting. And bear with me a minute, because I really want to read the synopsis. You wouldn't think events happening years apart at points in the solar system hundreds of millions of miles distant would have anything to do with each other. When she was 6, Daphne was taken to a neighbor's tool shed and came within seconds of never coming out alive. Most of the scars healed except for the one that went all the way through. And then a new paragraph again, it says something like, you wouldn't think that the serial murders of children and the one who got away would have any connection with the strange fate of one of Jupiter's moons. 2 decades later, when Daphne goes missing again, it's nothing new. Her brother sets out one more time to find her, so on and so forth. And the very last line is, there are some things in the cosmos that terrify even the gods. Brian's written some really, really great stories and short stories that Ellen Datlow and others have reprinted over and over, as Adam said last week. And he's written some very good Lovecraftian and cosmic horror themed stories, and other types of stories. But this, I don't know, this looks really, really good. The Immaculate Void by Brian Hodge. So,
I am a Hodge fan since the beginning. If you like The Stand and Swan Song, his first book, I think it was his first book, was called Dark Advent, and it was a much shorter but similar kind of apocalyptic tale. And then he followed that with a really groovy story about nightlife, about people that were being changed by street drugs and stuff like that. He's been around for a long time, and he's a really solid writer.
yeah, and is it true, Mr. Young, that you cried during Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
I wouldn't know. I mean, tears of passion, maybe. You know what I was doing during Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Mike?
You had to go there, didn't you?
He was quaking. That's what he was.
It's what the kids call quaking.
I heard you were overcome with sadness and emotion, but maybe that was wrong.
You are no longer my best friend. Fuck you.
Wait a minute, I was your best friend?
No, not really.
Here's a copy of Dark Advent and grabbed it.
Oh, nice. I
Yeah,
didn't even
that's-
know that was available as a hardback.
This is the
Ooh,
Cemetery
yeah.
Dance edition. And interesting, this is the kind of guy Brian Hodge is. We were chatting on Facebook about something or other. This is about a year, maybe two ago, and I mentioned that I picked I know what I did. I posted a photo of this book, and he PM'd me and he said, they actually he has an alternate ending that they didn't put in the book, and he emailed me a PDF of the alternate ending, which you can only get straight from the author, which I thought was really neat.
That is
So
super neat.
I printed it out and I put it with the book, but he's a great guy, and just had a novella out from Cemetery Dance that was very, very good, that I enjoyed. I think it came out earlier this year. I cannot remember the title of it.
Yeah, so we're going to get him on the show probably in September. I've got to email him back. The Immaculate Void, and then of course other new books right now: Laird Barron's Blood Standard, Philip Fracassi's Shiloh, which Lovecraftian Press published.
What is that? Never heard of that one.
I don't know, but I heard it was pretty good. And of course Paul Tremblay's new book. Oh, there you go. Laird Barron, Blood Standard, Shiloh. Then of course Paul Tremblay's upcoming book, Cabin at the End of the World and Disappearance at Devil's Rock, is only $2 right now. So I'll say, if you're not a pre-order person, you might want to rethink that, because it does help the authors when you do that.
And I'll add to that list. Speaking of Brian Hodge, because he has a story in it, as do I, which is why I'm mentioning it.
Of course,
is Best Horror of the Year, Volume 10, comes out June 12th. So
Volume 10. Jeez.
Volume 10.
How many volumes do we need?
10.
Oh, okay.
10. Because
Philip's in there now.
I'm in 10, so we need at least that many.
Yeah, they're going to stop doing it now. They got Philip finally.
Okay.
Or if it ends now, we can blame it on the fact that sales were so low because of
That's speaking of Solo, I have a question for you guys in a minute.
The series.
But before we get to this Solo question for you two guys, I just want to make a brief statement. History will vindicate Superman Returns, the movie. So,
please.
I thought you were going to say history will vindicate Superman 5.
You're insane.
No.
You'll Returns, are you being serious?
You'll see. I'm right.
Wait a minute. Superman Returns, the one with Bryan Singer did?
Yeah, Brandon Ruth.
Yeah.
Awful.
Vindicated as to...
It's unbelievable how wrong you are. How wrong you all are.
That's not a bad movie. It's not.
Thank you, Rick.
It's not fantastic, but
Do you know how many pedophiles it took to make that film?
Oh, Jesus Christ!
It's a good.
I think he was cleared of that. Don't sue me, Brian.
What about Kevin Spacey?
Let me just say that's a good Superman movie. It's not, the greatest superhero movie ever made, but it's an enjoyable movie. It's not Superman 4 or
no.
But it's a poor story. In fact, Superman and Lex Luthor never fight or anything in it. It's
talking
got a
about
really
he stabs him and throws him off a cliff.
Right. He's got a really horrible third act. It's awful. It's got some cool moments in it, and Brandon Ruth does an awesome Christopher Reeve, but he's a great Superman. Pretty poor movie.
And he's from near my hometown, so there you go. Well, of course, you are the same person who thinks The Fog isn't a good movie. So what do you know?
I like a lot of The Fog, but it is not a good movie. So
you're wrong again. Why don't you expound some wisdom on Solo, you and Philip?
In fact, you liked it so much you should watch Personal Shopper.
I saw it too, by the way.
Okay, there you go, Rick.
All right, Rick, why don't you start? Because
no spoilers.
All
right. I can't remember, Kelly and I think we were going to argue about it, but I can't remember which one of us is supposed to not
All
like
right.
it.
Justin, so I liked the movie. It wasn't great. It was a good popcorn movie. It was if you're a Star Wars nerd, it had a lot of nice little things. it's it's going to be ranked low on my list of Star Wars movies, but it's not a horrible film.
No, I agree with that.
They're gonna print that in an ad. Rick Clay says it's not a horrible film.
I say it's a good pop. I would say it's a good popcorn movie.
Didn't it suck?
This takes place in a universe that I absolutely love, so I'm totally fine with the movie. But I thought it was by far the weakest of the Disney-owned Star Wars movies.
I couldn't even get through.
I'll buy that. The only real criticism of the film, it's not well lit in the opening shots. I wish the lighting was better.
They were going with sort of a diluted palette with the cinematography. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So, Philip, you're saying that if I didn't like The Last Jedi, I won't like Solo?
No, because I did not like The Last Jedi, and I really enjoyed Solo. I thought The Last Jedi was a horrible film. And I think, my number one thing with the movie is whatever else you do, it has to be entertaining. I have to be entertained. And then you can do all the other stuff you want to do, be dramatic or and it just.
I don't know. You're going out on a limb there.
Jedi was so boring. I mean, God. It was. My
son looks at me halfway through the movie. We both go, and we never go to movies. Barely ever. He looks at me during the middle of the movie. He goes, "Dad, do you like this?" I'm like, "No, not really." He's like, "Can we go?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's go."
No, we have to stay because it's a Star Wars movie.
Well, not only that, but you dropped $60 if you had two people there. Jesus Christ!
That's the part I'm pissed about.
That movie was a chore to get through to watch.
I loved it.
I'd already spent the money. I wasn't going to waste another hour and a half.
I liked it a lot too.
Here's the thing with Solo. I liked Solo a lot because Solo was just like, to Rick's exactly point. It was a really fun film. It was really well done. I liked the cinematography. I thought they did a good job of differentiating the way the film looked from the rest of the the other Star Wars movies, and kind of gave it its own look, which I thought was neat. And it was much more it's much more stark and sort of duotone and a lot of throughout and dark, as Rick's point. But I thought it was a great little film. I mean, the only thing about that movie, which is why it's not doing well in my opinion, is unlike Rogue One, which I think stands on its own as a story, Solo, without the nostalgia, there's no story. It's if you don't know the Star Wars movies, then you would be very confused watching Solo, in my opinion. You'd be like, why do we care about this? Why do we care about that? Who is that person? Why are we learning? Like, all the stuff that made that movie cool was that you were like, oh, he's meeting, I don't know, I guess I won't give anything away, but that's how Han became that, and that's how Han became that, and that's how that happened, and that's all very neat. And that's what made the movie fun.
I'll play devil's advocate here, having just said that I liked it. There were a lot of times when I was thinking to myself, why do I care about this? I don't need to see when he gets his gun. I don't want to know why his name is Han Solo. That pissed me off so much because, look, why is Luke Skywalker's name Luke Skywalker? I just assumed Han Solo's name was always Han Solo, and that's space nonsense, and we were all okay with it.
Yeah, well, I thought that was a little lame.
I have a proposition, because now that we've had the first difficult box office film, I think they have to do something great in the next movie. And right. I think there is a setup for that. I would like to see Darth Vader fight somebody who pops up at the end of Solo.
Well, we did see that. If you're a super Star Wars geek, that happens in the Star Wars Rebels TV series.
I don't think.
Does it really?
No, I don't think they battled. I think he battled almost everybody else but Darth Vader. He battled the Emperor. He battled. We're not saying who it is. He battled Obi-Wan. Because I was ducking both Rebels and Clone Wars.
Let me throw two ideas out. Instead of Solo, if we had gotten a Lando movie and Han Solo shows up for 15 minutes in it, that I think would have been much more interesting because we don't know that much about Lando, so we could have had all sorts of stuff going on. It could have been a nice original story.
Yep.
If they weren't going to do that, then what I wanted to see was Han Solo and Boba Fett together doing some kind of heist movie, and at the end, Han betrays him, double crosses Boba Fett, and sets up their rivalry. But because otherwise, they can't make him the scoundrel that we meet at the beginning of Star Wars because it's now a Disney film. And so they've turned him into kind of a good guy. And something has happened between the end of that movie and the beginning of A New Hope to turn him into the guy who's willing to do everything as long as there's money involved and not stick his neck out.
Well, yeah, they've set that up for a later movie because there's an obvious betrayal that seems to be coming.
What about a Princess Leia movie? How come they didn't do that instead? There's a lot of potential there. I'm being serious.
You know what? If this continues this way, we'll get it.
Before the rebellion, she was just a princess. She just hung out in her castle and stuff.
I don't think so.
No, she might. Why don't you have something like
space dolls?
No, she was. Say she was sensitive to the Force, but didn't know what it was, and she was very good at influencing people.
She could be
a political drama.
Yeah, or maybe she could be a pickpocket, using the Force to steal.
Remember when she floated through space? That was awesome.
How about this? Just stop with the stupid Star Wars movies. Now, moving on. I just lost all my patrons with that comment.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Please follow this. Let's stop with the Star Wars movie. Please follow this with some kind of Superman or Batman thing.
Yeah, the counter is literally smoking from turning so fast backwards. I can't believe you like Superman Returns. That is weird.
Well,
no, it's okay. It teaches
the majority are not always right. I want you to remember this. Okay, this is important.
Wait a second. I thought you just said that our new motto was "Don't be stupid." Come on, Mike. Don't be stupid.
No, it's not like Mike said he liked Green Lantern. We got to give him a.
Yeah,
I thought Green Lantern was a better film than Superman Returns.
Green Hornet.
You are off the show, dude.
Green Hornet.
Now.
Oh, let's forget that.
Yes, I was going to change the subject to a superhero movie, and it was Avengers: Infinity Wars, and I wanted to say
I enjoyed that movie.
That we did a Patreon podcast full of spoilers for Avengers Infinity Wars, and that's going to be uploaded probably Tuesday. So if you're a patron, you'll get to listen to us argue about that. And if you're not a patron, it's only $5 a month. Just Google Lovecraft Easing Patreon. You get a lot of more podcasts, basically, just us talking, discussing things. So, all right. Anything else? Prize?
We can summarize that we all liked it, but some of us had reservations about certain things.
Correct.
Yes, prize. Okay, so our prize is a wonderful hardcover copy of a wonderful book, Ride the Star Wind, from Broken Eye Books. It is space opera, maybe, or outer space stories, sort of in the mythos.
Who's the author again?
The editor,
Scott Gable.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I must be thinking of a different book. Okay.
It's not. This is a collection of stories. I'm seeing an anthology of stories.
I think Pulver's in it. Joe in there?
Joe is
Joe is in there.
Yeah, I have it. I got that. I picked up that book. That's a Nick Gucker cover. Speaking of Nick Gucker.
It's a spectacular Gucker
beautiful cover. Yeah.
If you are interested in being in the random drawing for the prize, send an email to lovecrafteasingprizes@gmail.com and put what was it? Ride the Star Wind.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that the title?
You can just
put Ride the Star Wind. Yes, Starwind, whatever.
Oh,
email.
I do.
Whatever you want to say.
I do have one thing to bring up. I forgot all about. I'm not sure if Matt got in on this, but my copy of the Reanimator board game showed up from the Kickstarter, and it is very cool.
I posted about that on the page today.
Yeah, if I had any friends, I would ask them to come over and play it with me. But looks like again, I'll just be.
I've been trying. I'm under directions that I can't spend as much money. Well, with 2 kids in college, so I'm not buying any more Kickstarter games. At least that's what I told her.
I have similar restrictions, but I'll buy them if there's another Cthulhu Wars expansion, I'll buy it.
Well, who do we have next week? Does anybody remember? Is anybody on the ball? Because I'm not.
No.
Let's see here. Well, guys.
Isn't it Steve? Is Steve Resnick Tim?
Steve Resnick Tim, yes. And then I've actually got no show Father's Day on June 17th. But since my son's returning, this may change. Look at the podcast page at Lovecraft Easing's website, lovecrafteasing.com. Because this list is very up to date. He's coming back from a trip with friends, and so he asked if Father's Day could be June the 24th in the Davis household. So I may ask Kat Roca, is that how you say her last name?
I think so,
yes. To be on the 17th, and then no show on the 24th. But we'll figure it out. Next week is Steve Resnick Tim, yeah. So. All right, guys. Well, thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for being on the show with me.
Sorry you lost all your patrons because of us.
It happens every week, and then I have to send them pleading emails.
I like that he said because of our and didn't finish that he badmouthed the French and the Japanese for some.
Oh yeah, no, it wasn't you badmouthing Superman and Star Wars.
Superman Returns. I was specifically badmouthing Superman Returns.
Right.
And Last Jedi.
The French version of Superman Returns is awesome, though.
I blame myself. When you were bad-mouthing Superman Returns, I didn't get to your mute button fast enough, so I blame myself.
I'm going to go watch Personal Shopper.
right there. I'll be right there.
It has my highest recommendation.
I would love to see your review.
And I can't wait. I'm going to get some popcorn.
If you fast forward, you can see the 2 nude scenes and skip the rest.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week. Thanks a lot.